The tremor started in his hand, a ghost of a memory. Jin-Woo Park clenched his fist, forcing the shaking to stop, his knuckles white against the cool glass of his apartment window. Below, the lights of Seoul glittered, a sprawling galaxy of life and energy, but his eyes were fixed on the void, in its heart, a single, skeletal silhouette that clawed at the night sky. The Gunul Tower. The Shade Tower. Even from here, it felt like a grave stood on end. For 2 years, he had worked as a structural surveyor, a quiet penance for a past life. He mapped the stresses in concrete and steel, a calm, predictable world far from the chaos of his time in the Republic of Korea's special forces. The irony was a bitter pill he swallowed daily. A man whose career was built on high-angle rescue, on dangling from ropes in the most precarious spaces, was now terrified of the very structures he once conquered. The collapse had done that to him. 18 hours buried alive, the groans of dying concrete his only companion, the weight of a 10-story building a suffocating blanket. He was the sole survivor. Now, every creak of a floorboard, every shudder of a building in high wind, brought back the taste of dust and the crushing, absolute darkness. His phone buzzed, a harsh, insistent sound that shattered the quiet. It was the 3rd time the news outlet had called. The first 2 he had ignored. "Mr. Park," a frantic voice said before he could speak. "It's about your sister, Soo-jin." The blood in his veins turned to ice. "What about her?" "She's missing. Her editor is worried. Her last check-in was over 24 hours ago. She was investigating the Taiyang Corporation, specifically the Gunul Tower project." The name hit Jin-Woo like a physical blow. He knew she was tenacious, a bulldog of an investigative journalist, but he'd warned her about that place. Everyone in Seoul knew the stories. The construction halted overnight. The workers who walked off the site, eyes wide with terror, babbling about a song in the walls and faces in the shadows. The series of gruesome, inexplicable accidents. Her last data burst was corrupted, the voice continued. But we managed to pull a fragment. I'm sending it to you now. A file notification popped up on his screen. With a hand that had begun to tremble again, Jin-Woo opened it. It wasn't video, just audio. At first, there was only static, a sound like grinding teeth. Then, beneath it, a melody. It was a thin, ethereal, horribly sweet whisper. A song with no words that seemed to curl around the edges of his hearing. It made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Then, Soo-jin's voice, raw, with a terror he had never heard before. They took her face. Oh God, they don't have faces. A sharp, wet tearing sound, and then the line dissolved into a shriek of static. Jin-Woo stared at the tower, the black spike piercing the heart of his city. His phobia, his carefully constructed civilian life, all of it evaporated in a white-hot flash of primal duty. His sister was in there, in that tomb, and he was the only one who could get her out. The perimeter fence around the Gunul Tower was a joke, rusted and peeled back in a dozen places by urban explorers and ghost hunters. Jin-Woo slipped through an opening, the silence inside the grounds immediate and profound. The city's hum vanished, absorbed by the dead-end street and the colossal concrete monolith that blotted out the stars. The tower loomed over him, a 70-story skeleton of exposed rebar, unfinished floors, and gaping black window sockets that looked like the empty eyes of a skull. He moved to the base, his old SAR, search and rescue pack, feeling unnervingly familiar on his back. It wasn't filled with weapons, but with the tools of his old trade, coils of static rope, a lightweight harness, ascenders, carabiners, a headlamp, and a small, precise breaching charge, enough to pop a reinforced lock, not to bring down a wall. A service entrance was sealed with a heavy steel door and a thick chain. He found the GPS tag from Sujin's file, a faint ping from the 30th floor. 30 floors. The thought made his chest tighten. He knelt, his fingers tracing the lock. It was new, far too new for an abandoned site. Someone was controlling access. He opted for a less direct route. An external service shaft, designed for window washing rigs, ran up the side of the building. It was a sheer climb, but it offered access panels on every 5th floor. He clipped in, the familiar click of the carabiner a small comfort. He began to ascend, his movements economical and precise, a spider on a concrete web. He kept his focus tight on the wall in front of him, refusing to look down, refusing to think about the immense, unstable structure he was clinging to. The access panel on the 5th floor was unlocked. He swung inside, landing softly in a cavernous, unfinished lobby. Dust lay thick as snow on everything. The air was frigid, stagnant, and carried a faint, cloying scent like ozone and old meat. He switched on his headlamp, its beam cutting a sharp cone through the oppressive darkness. And then he heard it. The song. It was faint, a barely there whisper that seemed to come not from any one direction, but from the concrete itself. A cold dread, separate from his trauma, trickled down his spine. He moved deeper, his boots crunching on debris. Sujin's trail was easy to follow for a professional tracker. A discarded energy bar wrapper, a scuff mark where it was too clean, a single strand of her distinctive red-dyed hair caught on a piece of rebar. She was heading for the central service stairwell. He found the first sign of wrongness on the 7th floor. A massive concrete support pillar stood in the middle of a wide-open space. Cast into its surface, like a fossil in stone, was the shape of a human hand, fingers splayed in terror. It wasn't a print. The concrete was warped around it, as if the pillar had been briefly soft as clay. Jinwoo touched it. The material was stone cold, but a vile, greasy warmth seemed to emanate from the handprint itself. He backed away, his heart hammering. This wasn't just a haunting. This place was fundamentally sick. "Who's there?" a voice hissed from the darkness. Jinwoo spun, dropping into a low crouch, his hand instinctively going for the heavy-duty rescue knife on his belt. His headlamp beam found a figure huddled behind a stack of drywall sheets. A young man, no older than 20, his face pale and smeared with grime, his eyes wide with terror. "Stay back!" the man stammered, holding up a rusty pipe. "I'm not here to hurt you," Jinwoo said, keeping his voice low and calm. "I'm looking for my sister, a journalist." The man's posture relaxed slightly. "Red hair? Asking too many questions?" "That's her. Have you seen her?" "They took her," he whispered, his eyes darting around the shadows. "Just like they took my friend, Ji-hoon. We came in here on a dare. Big mistake." He introduced himself as Min-soo. He was jumpy, but he seemed to know the building's layout. "The whispers, they make you see things. The walls move. And the blanks." "Blanks?" Jinwoo asked, thinking of Sujin's words. The old construction crew, they never left. They just wander, humming that damn song. You don't want them to see you. They don't have. Min-soo trailed off, swallowing hard. "They don't have faces." A wave of nausea washed over Jinwoo. "Where did they take my sister?" "Up," Min-soo said, pointing a shaking finger towards the ceiling. "Always up. To the penthouse. That's where the song is loudest. I can show you the way. The main stairs. They aren't safe. They loop. But I know the service corridors." Jinwoo hesitated. His training screamed at him not to trust a panicked civilian in a hostile environment. But Min-soo was his only lead. "All right," he said, making a decision. "Stay behind me. We move fast, and we move quiet." They ascended through the guts of the tower, a labyrinth of rebar-studded corridors and echoing shafts. Min-Su proved to be a knowledgeable, if terrified, guide, pointing out structural weaknesses and hidden passages. With every floor they climbed, the song grew louder, a sibilant, multi-layered chorus that felt like it was being sung directly into his brain. On the 15th floor, they saw one. A figure in a dusty construction uniform stood facing a wall, its body swaying slightly in time with the unheard rhythm of the whispers. Its shoulders were slumped, its movements sluggish, like a marionette with slack strings. "Don't make a sound," Min-Su breathed into his ear. As they crept past, the figure slowly turned. Jinwoo's breath caught in his throat. Where a face should have been eyes, nose, mouth, there was only a smooth, unbroken expanse of skin, like a featureless mask. It was a horrifying blank slate. The husk tilted its head, and a low, resonant hum emanated from its chest. A single, perfect note in the tower's terrible song. Then, it turned back to the wall and resumed its slow, pointless swaying. Jinwoo pulled Min-Su into an adjacent room, his own breathing ragged. The image was seared into his mind. They took her face. "What is this place?" Jinwoo whispered, more to himself than to Min-Su. "A cage," Min-Su said, his voice trembling. "And we just walked into it." They continued their climb. The tower's geometry began to feel predatory. Hallways that should have been straight now curved imperceptibly. Doors opened into rooms they had just left. It was a disorienting, nauseating experience that preyed on Jinwoo's deepest fear. The building felt unstable, alive, a concrete beast rearranging its own intestines. During one tense moment, as they crossed a wide, unfinished floor, the concrete beneath their feet groaned, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the soles of his boots. Jinwoo froze, a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror seizing him. Darkness, the screech of tortured steel, the smell of pulverized concrete, the weight. "Jinwoo," Min-Su's sharp whisper cut through the memory. "Hey man, breathe. It's holding. It's an old building. It makes noise." Jinwoo forced himself to move, his muscles screaming in protest. Min-Su's hand on his shoulder felt steadying, but something was wrong. The kid was scared, yes, but there was a strange, feverish light in his eyes. On the 29th floor, just below Sujin's last known position, they found her makeshift base camp in a small office. Her laptop was open on a makeshift table. Her gear was neatly organized. A half-eaten protein bar lay next to the keyboard. She'd been taken by surprise. Jinwoo powered up the laptop. It was filled with her research. Financial records for the Taeyang Corporation, blueprints for the tower, and dozens of articles on Korean shamanism or Musok. The last file she had accessed was a video diary. He clicked play. Sujin's face, tired but determined, filled the screen. "I was right," she said, her voice a hushed whisper. "It's not just a land deal. Chairman Kwon, he's not just a CEO. He's the head of a damn cult. He built this tower on purpose. This land, it was used for ancient rituals, appeasing something they called the Eol Eater, the Face Eater. Kwon didn't want to appease it. He wanted to harness it. He thinks the tower acts as a massive spiritual antenna, focusing the entity. The accidents weren't accidents. They were feedings. He's trying to bind it, to make it his own personal fountain of power, but the ritual is incomplete. He's missing a final component, a strong, inquisitive spirit to act as the key." Her eyes widened as a sound came from off-camera, the whispering song. "Oh no," she breathed. "Someone's here." The camera clattered to the floor, showing only a view of the ceiling. The song swelled, and a new voice spoke. calm and authoritative. "The prodigal apprentice returns. Did you bring the lure?" A second voice, younger, sickeningly familiar. "Yes, master. He is strong, fearful, perfect. He is coming for his sister." It was Minsu's voice. The video ended. Jinwoo slowly turned his head, his body coiled like a spring. Minsu was standing by the doorway, no longer looking terrified. His expression was one of rapturous, fanatical devotion. In his hand was a small, ornate dagger. "Chairman Quan thanks you for your contribution," Minsu said, a wild smile spreading across his face. "Your spirit, so strong and protective, so full of delicious trauma, it's like a beacon in this place." It drew the Eolgul Eater's attention away from the lower floors, allowing us to bring you straight to the altar. You've been the perfect guide dog. Betrayal hit Jinwoo with the force of a physical impact. He lunged, but Minsu was faster than he looked. He slammed the office door shut, the heavy lock clicking into place. "Don't worry," Minsu's voice called through the door. "You have a front row seat for the apotheosis. You will help make our master a god." Footsteps receded down the hall. Jinwoo threw himself against the door, but it was solid steel. He was trapped. The song, the horrible whispering song, began to swell in volume, pressing in on him from all sides. The concrete walls of the small office seemed to pulse in time with it. His fear of enclosed, unstable spaces came roaring back, a tidal wave of panic. The room was shrinking. The ceiling was getting lower. The weight, the crushing weight. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing the panic down. He was not a victim. He was a rescuer. He unslung his pack, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He pulled out the small breaching charge and the detonator. He had one shot. The explosion blew the door off its hinges with a deafening crack. Jinwoo burst out into the hallway, his ears ringing. He had to get to the penthouse. He ignored the treacherous service corridors and ran for the central elevator shaft. The elevators were dead, of course, but the shaft was a straight shot up. He peered into the black abyss. The song was a torrent now, flowing down from the top of the tower like a waterfall of sound. He anchored his rope to a thick support beam, clipped his ascenders onto the line, and launched himself into the darkness. He ascended with desperate speed, his arms and legs pumping, the rough concrete walls of the shaft flying past him in the beam of his headlamp. He was in his element here, a vertical world of ropes and carabiners. But the tower fought back. From the darkness above, something moved. One of the husks, a faceless construction worker, was crawling down the thick elevator cables towards him, its movements jerky and unnatural. It hummed its bass note in the choir, a sound that vibrated through the steel cables. Then another appeared, and another. They were climbing down like spiders on a web. Jinwoo drew his rescue knife. As the first husk reached him, it lunged, its blank face inches from his. He kicked out, sending it tumbling into the darkness, its hum fading into a distant thud. He sliced the rope of another, sending it plummeting. He was a one-man army against the damned, fighting a vertical battle in the throat of a monster. He finally reached the top floor, pulling himself out of the shaft and onto the cavernous, unfinished floor of the penthouse. The sight before him stole the breath from his lungs. The entire outer wall was missing, open to the night. A violent thunderstorm raged over Seoul, rain and wind whipping through the space. In the center of the room, Soo-jin was chained to a crude altar of rebar and bone, trapped within a glowing circle of painted talismans. Her face, it was blurring, the features losing their definition, like a watercolor painting left in the rain. Her eyes were wide with a terror that was being systematically erased. Standing before her was a man in an impeccably tailored suit, his arms raised to the stormy sky. Chairman Quan. He was older, with a severe aristocratic face that was alight with mad triumph. Min-Su stood beside him, chanting from an old book. Around them, a dozen more figures in black suits, Quan's fanatical followers, formed a perimeter. "You are too late, soldier!" Quan boomed over the storm. "The vessel is prepared. The key is in the lock. Your very presence here, your potent wounded spirit, has completed the circuit." As he spoke, the song reached its crescendo. The air thickened, shimmering like heat haze. From the very core of the building, from the concrete floor and pillars, it began to emerge. The Eogul Eater. It wasn't a ghost. It was the building given flesh. A chaotic, semi-solid amalgamation of concrete, twisted rebar, and weeping grave soil. And the faces. Hundreds of stolen faces swirled within its viscous body, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with eternal horror. It was a tumor grown from the tower's rotten soul. Quan's followers drew weapons, turning on Jinwoo, but they were not his primary concern. The Eogul Eater extruded a limb, a thick tendril of concrete and bone, and lashed out, trying to pull him into its mass. Jinwoo reacted on pure instinct. He fired his grappling hook from its launcher on his belt, the claw biting into a steel girder high above. He launched himself into the air, swinging in a wide arc over the heads of the cultists. This was his battlefield now, a three-dimensional arena of steel and concrete. He landed on a high catwalk, unhooking his line. Below, the battle was chaos. The cultists were trying to get a bead on him while Quan and Min-Su frantically continued their chant. The monster, a sentient piece of the architecture, was his main threat. Walls buckled, extruding, grasping limbs. The floor shifted, trying to throw him off balance. It was his worst nightmare made real. An entire building actively trying to kill him. He rappelled down a pillar, kicking off to swing behind two cultists and taking them down with precise, non-lethal strikes. He couldn't kill the monster. It was the building. But Quan's ritual, it was the heart. He had to stop the ritual. He saw it then. A massive, custom-built antenna on the roof, just visible through a gaping hole in the ceiling. It pulsed with a sickening purple light, channeling the storm's energy down into the ritual circle. That was the linchpin. Quan's antenna, the focus. He had no more charges. No way to destroy it from here. He fought his way towards the altar, his mind racing. Sujin's face was almost gone, a smooth, pale oval. The monster surged towards her, drawn by the final offering. Jinwoo saw a heavy-duty construction winch near the edge of the open floor, its thick steel cables spooled neatly. An idea, desperate and insane, sparked in his mind. He dodged a grasping, bone-filled hand and sprinted for the winch. He grabbed the heavy steel hook, looped the cable over a high girder, and fired his last grappling hook, not at an anchor point, but at the base of the antenna on the roof. The hook snagged, biting deep into the antenna's support struts. He hit the power switch on the winch. With a deafening groan of protesting metal, the cable began to tighten. "No!" Quan shrieked, his composure finally breaking. "Stop him!" The cultists and the monster converged on Jinwoo. He fought like a cornered animal, using the winch's cable as a weapon, swinging it to knock men off their feet. A concrete hand grabbed his leg, pulling him down. The blank, smooth face of a husk loomed over him, its hum vibrating in his skull. He drove his knife into its chest, and it dissolved into dust and static. With a final, catastrophic screech of tearing steel, the massive antenna was ripped from its moorings on the roof. It swung down like a guillotine, trailing sparks and lightning, and crashed directly through the penthouse ceiling. It slammed into the center of the ritual circle with the force of a meteor strike. The circle shattered. The talismans exploded in a shower of light. The connection was broken. A wave of raw, untethered psychic energy erupted from the point of impact. It was a silent, invisible explosion. Quan and Minsu were at its epicenter. They didn't even have time to scream. The power they had sought to control turned on them, flaying them, dissolving them into shimmering dust that was instantly scattered by the wind. The other cultists were thrown back like dolls, their bodies broken. The Eel Ghoul Eater, its anchor and its master gone, let out a final psychic shriek that vibrated in the teeth of every living thing for miles. Its form destabilized, the stolen faces within it wailing in unison before it imploded, melting back into the concrete and steel of the tower, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and a profound echoing silence. The song was gone. Jinwoo scrambled to the altar, cutting Sujin's bonds. Her face was still pale and indistinct, but the horrifying smoothing process had stopped. She was breathing, her eyes fluttering. "Jinwoo?" she whispered, her voice weak. The tower groaned around them, a final, dying shudder. The destruction of the antenna had catastrophically damaged the penthouse's structural integrity. The floor tilted, and a spiderweb of cracks spread from the impact crater. The whole place was coming down. "We're leaving. Now," he said, his voice pure command. He scooped her into his arms, clipped her securely to his own harness, and ran for the open edge of the building. There was no time to go down. Only out. He anchored a final rope to the most stable beam he could find, threw the rest of the coil into the storm, and leapt. They fell into the rain-swept darkness. For a terrifying second, they were in freefall, and then the rope caught, the harness digging into him. They swung in a dizzying arc, the lights of Seoul spinning below them. Jinwoo controlled their descent, his movements sure and steady, a lifetime of training taking over. They rappelled down the sheer face of the skyscraper, a two-person pendulum against the raging storm, leaving the groaning, dying tomb behind them. They landed in a heap in a forgotten alleyway 70 floors below, just as the first rays of dawn began to break through the storm clouds. Jinwoo lay on the wet asphalt, gasping for air, the open sky above him the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He had faced the belly of the beast, looked into the face of a monster made from his own deepest fears, and had dragged them both back into the light. He looked at Sujin. The color was returning to her cheeks, and her features were slowly, miraculously, resolving back into the familiar face of the sister he loved. She smiled weakly. Across the city, the Junul Tower stood silent against the rising Sunday. Its master was gone, its hunger unsated. But for tonight, the whispers were silent. And for Jinwoo Park, the crushing weight was finally lifted.